All right, welcome everybody to Bible study, a Sermon on the Mount, and we've had 1 week of this so far, and we found out that this is one of the most cited verse parts of the Bible by the early Christians, and so they were paying a whole lot of attention to this. So it looks like maybe something that we ought to pay attention to as well. So we have why is it called the Beatitude? Anybody remember why is it we call it the first part of the chapter 5, we call it the Beatitudes? Oh, what good memories we have.
Because they're blessings?
Yeah, so Beatitude was a, another form of saying that there was a blessing. So we have these different versions. So somebody has maybe some Bible versions that you want to read. We're reading verses 4 and 5. And this is the New International Version printed here. All right, does someone else want to read it from their Bible?
You said 4 and 5
Right,
of chapter
chapter
5?
5 of chapter 5, right.
4 and 5. I can read. I'm reading out of the Message version. So
Yeah,
mine's like paraphrase. It's not so. Um,
it's not so flowery. Yeah, let's hear that one.
yeah. Okay, so it says 4 and 5 says, "You are
Because it's
blessed.
in safe driving mode.
Oh, Vivian's, you're
You're
not,
blessed. You feel you've lost what is most dear to you. Only then can you embrace can you be embraced by the one most dear to you. You are blessed when you're content with just who you are, no more, no less. That's the moment you find yourselves proud owners of everything that cannot be bought."
ooh, wow, that was the Message.
Yeah, that's the Message version.
Okay,
Favorite
that's
version of the Bible.
right. So that is quite different, isn't it? Um, anyone else have a different one?
I have the New Living Translation. It's pretty close to what you've got. It
Okay.
says, God blesses those who mourn, for they will be comforted. God blesses those who are humble, for they will inherit the whole earth.
Okay. And then we have the Phillips down here. How happy are those who know what sorrow means, for they will be given courage and comfort. Boy, that seems like an a opposite of what's true. Happy are those who mourn, blessed are those who know sorrow, blessed are those who mourn. So to me, this is incredibly relevant topic. How many people do you know that have coronavirus or COVID-19? How many know anybody that has COVID-19?
I know several.
Yeah. And if we tallied them up, I wonder how many know of anyone who has died of COVID-19? I'm going to screen. Yeah. And thankfully, not everybody in our immediate family has someone who has died of COVID-19, but think of the amount of sorrow and mourning that there is. And so you're going to tell somebody, well, blessed are you who mourn, for they shall be comforted. How do we do that? Can we do that with a straight face?
Well, I liked a couple of your questions. One of those being defining those words, because I think we're real quick to uh, say things without really understanding all the details of the words, like what does blessed mean and what does sorrow mean, and how do we, I mean, the interpretations seem to be a lot different depending upon the translation uh, that's provided.
Right. So Dave likes to say every text have a context. So I'm going to jump on that wagon. What in Jesus' day would have caused people to mourn? So what would they have been mourning in Bible times?
Loss of a child.
Yeah. So infant mortality rate was really high. I was looking at the internet. The average life expectancy was 35 years old because so many children died that it skewed, the average. So it was not a guarantee that anybody would see their children live to adulthood. No antibiotics, no immunizations, no. Hey, there's a child. There's Grayson. So what else would they mourn?
If you were a slave, I think I'd be mourning. If I was a slave, I think I'd be mourning.
Yeah, your freedom and any kind of ability to get out of slavery.
This may be a little off, but I think they would probably mourn the loss of crop.
So like no food to eat.
No food to eat. Yeah.
Absolutely. How
Family.
how about grasshoppers? Evidently, they would have these grasshopper, um, these pests, these pests that would come and have a horrible infestation of grasshoppers eating all your crops. So then that guess who doesn't live to adulthood when all the food is gone? It's the children who would suffer. So we know that people had. I would think that you'd mourn about paying taxes. I mean, you'd have all that money that you had to give over to the Roman Empire, cheating people like Matthew the tax collector, taking all your money.
It seems there were all kinds of wars again and again and again.
Wow. Yeah, and the casualties of war. Yeah. And and I think it would do horrible things to your crops too. You can't plant your crops, you can't harvest your crops when there's the threat of being killed by going out because of war. So, what do we know about mourning? What do we know about grief?
Loss of loved ones.
Right. And and be it may not be real to you until someone you have loved deeply has passed away. So you can know about grief, but maybe you don't really realize how hard it can be. It may not be easy to get up in the morning when there's grief.
So you were asking, of course, COVID kinds of things, but I was just watching the news and looking at the smoke blowing west of Fort Collins, and I mean, mourning for the earth, mourning for the forest, mourning for creation, and the Great Barrier Reef is half dead, and it's, lots of things to mourn for the earth, but also our systems. I mean, all this stuff is in our face right now, and the um, racism conversations that we're starting to enter into, so that more systemic kind of place where injustice lives, and addressing that, living through that.
Be, being treated um, with less fairness or less equality, and mourning the loss of children who go out, and we had a student at my middle school who was shot on New Year's Eve by a bullet that was fired just by someone having a celebration, and it went through one house and into her house and shot her in her living room. It was, just horrible grief for senseless things like that that happen. A sixth grader, she hadn't even made it through middle school.
Sometimes when I think about mourning or, very sad things, I think about a conversation that I had with Rebecca Dolly, where she was talking about things that were going on in Nigeria and the things that she heard about when she was documenting the horror stories of what was going on. So I think if anyone would know about mourning or grief, it's certainly her. And that's one of the things that I think about when we think about mourning and grief, the
Yeah.
things happening there.
Well, yeah, well said. Um, and you don't forget. I mean, those things are um, devastating just to hear about them, let alone to live through them. So it's traumatizing to Rebecca Dolly just to have to hear the stories. And the Church of the Brethren has just come out with a new book that's telling some of the stories of some of these people in Nigeria. I don't know. Does anybody remember the name of that new book? Um, just published by Brethren Press.
Something about tears, isn't it? Say it with tears.
Yeah,
I don't.
yeah, it has tears in it. So um, that would be.
The New Messenger has some of the stories in it.
Oh yeah, here it is. My mess. Truth telling. Yeah, I can find it. Yeah. Um, what's the title?
Is it on the back?
It is "We Bear in Tears," I think, is the name of it. So some of the stories of the women. Yeah. So these are our sisters in Christ. So we have much to mourn with them. So they will be comforted. And how does that work anyway? What is the Bible trying to say? Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted.
I have a question sort of about that, because what it raises up for me is who is going to offer the comfort. Who is
Ah,
going to comfort them? And
ah,
I don't know if we should be worried about when. I know last week we were talking and we were saying that it's not, something in the for the future. It's something we should be living every day. But how many of us actually even get the opportunity to comfort someone? You know what I mean? So that's the question for me. Who is comforting those who mourn?
yeah, good question. So, um, those who have been living through grief might be able to answer this the best. Those who've lost a loved one, where did the comfort come from?
So for me, I received a lot of comfort just from, the people would say, I'm thinking about you, I'm praying for you. I would gather lots of comfort just from knowing that people were out there holding me and the family in 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 prayer. And it just feels it excuse me, it's felt like a great wave of love that flows and that I get to ride upon. And exactly where it's coming from and how and what, I I can't fully articulate, but the Spirit, having some sense of the Spirit of Christ being there. Yeah. So that type of that comforts me and has carried me well.
So that was your Christian family, which could be far and wide, I think, is what you're describing, Vicky. So who is it that's supposed to do the comforting? Maybe that's our job description.
I was when my wife, excuse me, when my wife was dying, I was asked what words were most helpful to me, and I couldn't remember what people said, but I could remember who was there, and it was just the presence of other people, or knowing that they were, as Vicky said, that there were people out there that were feeling my pain, and just knowing that was really helpful to me.
Right. So we don't necessarily have to be great um, orators to be saying the most appropriate words. That sometimes it can just be your physical presence being there.
I would say that it doesn't even have to be physical. I've been fortunate enough not to have lost someone, but I've definitely had some trials going on. And I've been in Ohio now for 2 years, almost 3. Can't believe that that's crazy enough. But my comfort actually comes from the people that I was probably closest to, which is actually those in Prince of Peace. And I mean, I get comfort by just being able to talk to them and knowing that they're praying for me. So they're not even with me physically, but that is a comfort. That's a huge comfort for me.
Those bonds are not easily broken. That's really good. So Celia's moving away, but those bonds are not going to be broken. We have a long fishing
No
line. We
way.
just keep. Oh,
I have found that on the death of someone, try not to focus on your grief, but try to count your blessings that they were to you. And I've tried to share that sometimes with people who've lost a loved one, and just said, when you get overwhelmed with grief, try to count the blessings that this person was to your life.
mm, yeah, helpful. Yeah, it's like a tidal wave for many people. Grief can just knock you out and knock you over, and um, and they then the promise maybe is what is the blessing, that they will receive comfort, that they will be given courage and comfort. And I don't know if everybody can say that is their experience, but I would say that's true for me, that I have comfort in knowing my loved one isn't gone forever. I mean, there will be a day when we will be back together in heaven.
Well, I've been thinking about what Vicky shared a little earlier. That it's not just individual, but it's community. Um, in this passage, if you look back at the end of chapter 4, it says Jesus is teaching in Galilee, and then and there's just all this list of diseases and afflictions that the crowds. It talks about the crowds, and great crowds from Galilee, Jerusalem, the Decapolis, which are 10 cities, and beyond and from beyond the Jordan. I mean, to me, it says two things. One, there's a lot of suffering. And, chances are, these aren't the Romans. These are the people who are under the Romans, right? And then two, Jesus is, when he talks about blessed are those who mourn, for example, I mean, people recognize that he's talking directly to them, and it's not just individuals, but it's the community, right? So, it's really like a great, he's meeting them where they're at. And, the comfort is both about, being there and all of us doing to help each other and feed each other, all that sort of stuff. But that God is not going to allow this crazy world to stay the way that it is. I think about that a lot.
Well, I mean, and that also pulls us into the next one. But yeah, that's an interesting thought, that this crazy world won't always have to be the way it is.
Well, Dave, are you mourning or are you comforted, or both?
Both and, yeah. I mean, so some of you are expressing ways that you've received comfort, but it's like the manna thing. I need some today, and I need some tomorrow, and I need some the next day, and I can't. Today won't be enough for tomorrow, right? I mean, that's just I think that's really
On the counter.
why we're all coming together, and that's why Jesus has crowds following him, I think.
It certainly got people's attention. It says that they had diseases and pains, demoniacs, epileptics, and paralytics, and they were all following Jesus in chapter 4. So yeah, you can imagine how much medical attention there was. What's the cure for epilepsy? What's the cure for demons? Lyle, Sherrod?
Well, I don't know. I haven't got rid of mine yet, but I did have a brother and minister tell me that his son, who was about 10, came to him. And he said 15 minutes later, he's holding his son's lifeless body at a clinic. And, this is facing tragedy that most of us have been able to avoid, or at least as much as possible. In
Right.
Nigeria, they don't name a child until it's a year old.
Yeah. Just for fear that the child won't live. Yeah. So, when I think of we will be comforted, I'm thinking that I don't have to do grief by myself. I know that, like Vicky says, and like Fred says, that someone would be there to sit with me, or to hold my hand, or to help me out.
When you talk about Jesus and who he is healing and what he is doing, and that's what his work was. And we don't think, we call the doctor, and we do telemedicine now with little boxes on the screen. But what they were doing was experiencing life. And for me, as I think about it now, energy, just all the energy that is going on back and forth between Jesus and the folks that are with him. And I think their capacity to be aware of that energy and experience it probably far surpasses our current experience, because we kind of push that sort of stuff someplace else. And I think a kind of way to reclaim that energy of healing, of prayer, of some sense of the spirit, of a movement of whatever it is not, we just don't access it like we could or maybe even should. So so that also lends to, it's the comforting piece that I think we can all indeed experience, but we don't pay a whole lot of attention to it until it's something dramatic, like mourning the loss of, someone or something that we love. And so
Hmm.
it's just really powerful stuff that I think is going on here, that's really hard. I think it's much harder for us to understand, and the other thing is it's just the words, and we kind of have talked about that, but I keep listening to the stuff on the radio, the TV, what's going on, the judge, the Supreme Court, and here's all these lawyer folks, and everybody is being so particular about their words, because words have meaning, and it really, really makes a big difference which word you use when. And so, blessed are those who mourn. Happy are those who mourn. What? You've got to be kidding me. This just makes no sense at all. So, yeah, I'd love to know what the context was back then, what they were thinking and feeling and experiencing, and what all of this meant to them, how they understood it. So I don't think if this is the way the translations go, it's really a challenge in my world to grasp the meaning of these words. So just saying.
Very, very different translations. But, if we're talking about mourning, we're not allowed to travel. We're not allowed to congregate. And in many ways, our world is a lot more like Jesus' world than it is what we had, 7 or 8 months ago. We don't have things in the grocery store necessarily. Toilet paper was gone. So we had to give up a lot of those things that were not, that we were used to just assuming would always be there, and they weren't. They weren't there for us.
I wondered too, in view of both of your comments, how different the translations are of what was said. And also, I'm sitting here wondering what the receptors were. I mean, the people that heard the words, were they devout followers? Were they people who were there because they were curious? People because they had need? People that were just critical? I mean, I wonder how different people might have received what was said, which changes things so much. And maybe that's some of the reason for some of the different translations. Maybe maybe some of the I'm trying to think of the word, but some of the writings may have been different as they were produced originally.
Yeah, that's a great point. Who were the people in the crowds? And so um, we just know that Jesus saw the crowds and he went up to the mountains. We know that, as Dave said in verse 4, there were there were the epileptics and um, the people with diseases and paralytics. And so paralytics can't go very far very fast, but someone might have carried them along to follow Jesus. There are some theories that it was he wasn't talking just to the 12 disciples, right? The crowds make it seem like it was people who were like like um, Bono came to town and everybody wanted to go see who, what was up with this guy or something.
Yeah, Fred, I think about it as, I mean, I think all of the above. Um, a crowd's not monolithic for sure. And, if any of you have seen the movie The Life of Brian, which is Monty Python, you need a laugh. I mean, some folks thought it was sacrilegious, and there were all kinds of protests when it first came out. But I mean, we're not there yet. But the blessed are the peacemakers. The crowd. Someone goes, "Blessed are the cheesemakers," and then everybody starts riffing off of that in terms of, is that what he really said, and why is he so interested in dairy? And I mean, to me, and that's just a reminder that the people heard all kinds of stuff. And we do too, right? So yeah, and it's even okay to laugh about it. I love that movie.
Well, there were no loudspeakers, so what did they hear, actually? We never know. But why did Jesus, he's talking about these Beatitudes. Why do you choose those who mourn? And, he could have said, blessed are those who are angry. But I don't think that one made it into the Beatitudes. So he goes, blessed are those who mourn. And he's trying to get a message across. There's something important about you because you're experiencing mourning. And so you are a special person to Jesus. It seems like the kingdom of heaven has come near to you because you have been a person who experienced loss and grief.
Well, also, I think about Jesus is probably one of the people that knows mourning the best. I mean, he went to the cross. He knows all too well about mourning, that these people want to harm him, and all he wants to do is save them. But I would say that he's probably the one that knows it better than any of us, so he could be our comfort.
Absolutely, and he would know our grief and share our sorrows, right?
Well, and back to your comment about not commenting about those who are angry, that I hadn't thought about that, but that is an interesting point, because people who are angry, from my experience and training, are people that have been hurt. And pain is I think pain is a large component that goes with anger. And so that's kind of an interesting question, I think.
Right. So blessed are those who are devastated because of grief and mourning. I mean, that's what he's kind of getting to, the pain rather than the secondary emotion. He's going right to the primary emotion. Blessed are you who mourn.
So my book, if I could share what I have the New King. Lord, I can't see that piece. The NKJV.
New King James, yeah.
It says, I won't read the whole piece, but it says, in regards to blessed are those who mourn, the one who weeps over the pains of life can be confident of God's healing and comfort. In our sadness, the Holy Spirit will move us to joy.
So they're sending the comforter is what I think you're saying. So our comfort can come not only from each other, from brothers and sisters, but directly from the Holy Spirit. I certainly think we could have testimony about that. People who've had their comfort come through some power greater than was humanly possible. Yeah, and so there's a lot packed into a small little verse. I want us to move to blessed are the meek, and here's the Message. The Phillips. So we have some different versions. Blessed are the meek. What's a meek?
The what is this? New English Bible says, "How blessed are those of a gentle spirit, for they shall have the earth for their possession."
Oh, gentle spirit. That's a nice translation. Blessed are the meek. I keep thinking about politics, and um, the meek don't get very far in a political campaign. But
But
that's, go ahead.
no, but I mean, but that's because of us, isn't it? I mean, somehow our value system is screwed up, and I don't know why, but we seem to be more impressed with those who are very confident, forthright, angry, whatever, than we are with those who are meek or those who are uh, gentle. Um, I was trying to remember the Roman emperor who had a speech impediment, and I remember the quote from him was, "Isn't it more important what I say than how I say it?"
Oh,
And it seems to me that we really get into the guy that's got the strongest delivery and yells the loudest somehow must be the most right.
so you're saying that the kingdom of heaven doesn't look like that macho kind of important people kind of world.
Yeah, and so I struggle with, and you guys may already have this resolved in your own minds, but I struggle with whether this is what is to happen today, whether it's current or whether it's futuristic.
That was one of our um, big conversations last week of, is this for here and now, or is this for someday down in the future?
A spoiler alert to Fred. If you look ahead, verse 21 in chapter 5 talks about anger. Just saying, we're not going there now, but I'm just, that's where the anger part is, just so you know. I mean, I really like the way the Message has translated meek and the understanding of meek. Again, it's words drive me crazy. And for this, it's like, because I get one entirely different kind of sense that is not helpful. But your Message translation, well, you're blessed when you're content with just who you are, no more, no less. And when you are happy with nothing, you've got everything. I want or need nothing. And when you can get to that space, essentially everything is yours, if that makes any sense. But I think that's great.
Well, Vicky, I kind of think the same thing. When I look at this, I think of, especially when it talks about being content. Um, I, this kind of makes me think of, well, some current brethren, but also if we go back to like even what I have around me here, which is like the German Baptist brethren, they just live more. I mean, that they live more of a plain life, not a we don't need stuff. And I think that even Church of the Brethren has adopted a lot of that, because most people have most things that they need, but it's not common for brethren to go out and spend an exorbitant amount of money on meaningless things.
Right. And how does that make you content? Do those things give you contentment? And they might be a small distraction or for a few minutes. Yeah, I'd love to read Anne Lamott, and she talks about how you can have you can buy a new car and have that um, give you joy for about 15 minutes, and then you're back to, you're still the same person you were.
Well, and to, Vicky, you were asking, or you were saying how important the meaning of words are, right? So I was just looking through real quick. I mean, computers are great because you can Google and find stuff, but one of the things that came across that, meekness is strength under control. So it's not, weakness, which, I think meek and weak, and they sound alike, and there's probably this, tendency to think of it that way. Milk toast, I don't know, terms like that. But having the sense of your convictions and knowing that, and the rest of the world is going crazy. I mean, I just keep thinking about that. Most of these people, Rome is telling you, you live this way, you give us your money, we're building these great monuments, and they're occupied peoples. And Jesus is saying, if you're living with the strength of your convictions that Rome is not the kingdom of God, then you will inherit the earth, right? I really did, and I think about that today. Not just about our current political situation in America, but the world is a lot. To me, it seems like, gosh, Rome is all over the place today.
Yeah, and when you describe that personal sense of authority, that inward sense of power, again, there's an energy that goes with that, and it doesn't have to be loud and blatant and out there, but it's a very grounded sense, and it's one's own personal authority and one's own personal power. And that's not meek. Meek is not the right word. It's like, somebody rewrite this, please. So but was Jesus meek? The question is down there. And when I make Jesus meek in that sense of milk toast, it's like, this is not, that can't be right. So it is more to that inner power without violence, for the most part, that I think is also what's going on. So what does meek really mean? I don't know. I do like the Phillips and the Message translations. Those are helpful. But I think what we're talking about here is a different version of what meek is. So
Right. So where, yeah, I don't know the Greek. I don't know what the translation would be, but we've been stuck with meek for a long time in the translations. and then was Jesus meek? That's the question. People will have different images. Jesus with um, with big bulging muscles. Is that Jesus doing? We have we can make Jesus into almost any image we want.
Well, and you're mentioning translation. So Kathy, you said you have the New King James,
Yes.
right? Does it have meek in there? Is that the word that they use?
Yes, but their little definition or supporting information says meekness is not weakness, but power under control. It implies a humble acceptance of one's lowly position before God. By trusting in Him, the meek will inherit the blessings of God's fulfilled promises.
Okay, so that has a little commentary alongside your verses.
Yes.
Yeah. Which I think helps because, and maybe that meek, King James is back the 16th century. New King James is just an updating of that. But, maybe that's where that word comes into the English language from, and may have meant, I have no idea, it may have meant something totally different in Elizabethan England than it does today, right? So that just is, a sense of when we read, we need to just ask all those different kinds of questions, because that can make a big difference in how we, interpret it, understand it.
But same thing with inherit. So in that day and age, we see all kinds of things that relate to how does one inherit. So if I inherit something, it didn't belong to me, right? It was not mine to start with, right?
So it only belonged to men back then.
Oh, gee. Thanks. Thanks.
Right? I
Well,
mean, that's pretty much the way it has been for a long time till more recently, except for matrilineal societies, like some of the Native Americans or whatever, right? Who we could learn a lot from.
so I'm out. Okay. Um, but yeah, so it it would be something that would be a gift, something that was transferred upon, that was given to me. So if I inherit the earth, holy cow, that's a lot of stuff. So that would be huge.
Yeah, I might ask if I could return to sender on that gift.
Yeah, if the world according to Gail looks like, I could be inheriting the whole earth.
So this has such a big disconnect in so many ways. It's you have the first phrase and then you have the second phrase. If I'm sad, I'm going to be comforted. That makes sense. If I'm hungry, I'm going to be filled. What does meek have to do with earth? You get what I'm saying? Does that the pairing? It's like what?
I think it might have to do with me compared with inherit.
Right, right.
I have an
Yes.
idea that
Okay.
maybe the non-meek are so busy fighting that there's none of them left to inherit the earth. And the only people left are the ones that quietly knew what they believed and didn't get into all that scrapping.
Very good. I, lowly kind of makes it seem more compatible. Lowly compared to God, that. So then I don't own much, but when I get blessed, then I get to own everything. I kind of like that one. Kind of makes sense to me. I'm lowly compared to God, like Kathy was saying in King James.
Or if you're talking about, I mean, who inherits? Is it only the oldest son? Does everybody inherit? As long as you're a guy, does the fifth guy get nothing, or just so does that mean the fifth guy is the meek person and will indeed get to inherit something?
Or do these inheritance rules get tossed out completely because no longer are there, the inheritance, the oldest son gets to inherit out. That doesn't say anything about the oldest son in this Beatitudes anymore.
Yeah, but Jesus does tell his stories, his parables, and kind of flips those kinds of categories up on their head, right? I mean, the elder brother, youngest, all that sort of stuff. And, I think about too inheriting the earth, and maybe there's something about new heavens, new earth, where like in the book of Revelation, the last chapter that comes down, and it's good for everyone, right? I mean, especially for those who've not, in a sense, destroyed their own souls by trying to keep everything for themselves. See, I keep going back to, I think everything Jesus said, I shouldn't say everything, most things Jesus says are colored by Rome. I mean, that's the context that people are dealing with. And all the expectations that are part of that come not just from Rome itself, but, the history of the Israelite Jewish people and dealing with all that. And gosh, it sure seems like only the powerful ones and the sword are the ones who inherit the earth, and that still seems to be the way today. And Jesus is saying, nope, 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 you're hang in there. But that's also like, how long do we have to hang in there?
Well, the kingdom of heaven has come near, and maybe the kingdom of heaven is especially near when there's those who are hanging in there and believing that there's something for them, not just to be um, bullying their way through life. Does
Okay, here, go ahead.
does the bully win?
Well, so what if you don't, what if you don't think of it as the individual, but you think of it as the community and the corporate thing? Community Rome, the Hebrews, whoever, that group, the whole group that Jesus is talking to, the corporate bunch, as opposed to the ruling bunch. What does that, I can't go there, but it's like, wait a minute, if I'm playing off of what Dave is saying, then that, I think it probably really makes sense. We are so, it goes back to our current context. We are so individualistic that we're only thinking about ourselves, and we don't recognize our connectedness to everything and everybody else. I think the folks in Jesus' day understood that in about 1,000 million deeper ways than we can even imagine.
Yeah, well said. And the Hebrew, they were the underdogs. They were the Palestinians. They were the occupied, and so nobody's talking about Rome now as the as the winner.
Well, I think the place, and I don't know much about it, to be honest, but how the Black church and the Black community, how do they read the Sermon on the Mount? How have they read the Sermon on the Mount? I think there's probably a lot to learn from that, from, Gail, you've mentioned Howard Thurman, for example. And, I don't know. I haven't read that, but I sure am curious of what kind of insights communities that have suffered that kind of loss and how they read that. I think that's pretty interesting.
Well, yeah, if you're a mother and you fear for the life of your teenage son every time they walk out the door, this might be really relevant to you as you walk every single day. So, yeah, what might we learn from, Jesus is picking these verses to say, this is what the kingdom looks like, guys. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are they who mourn. Blessed are the meek, or what's the other word? Um, the humble, or those who claim nothing. Um, and it seems like the Sermon on the Mount has come up in society. People will sometimes even refer to the Sermon on the Mount. And um, would this passage come to mind as we look at, Vicki and us were watching the Supreme Court hearing. Blessed are the meek. That comes to mind. How are we going to vote? That comes to mind. Um, how do we put our faith into practice? So is that something that you can think about and share back next week about? Maybe did any of this come up for you in your daily walk? You're working with your boss.
Well, I'd like to mention one. I know we're close to time. I keep looking back over to Luke 6 because that's the Luke version. And, Luke has Beatitudes or the blessed, but Luke also has woes. And Matthew doesn't have woes, but there are woes in Luke's version. So there is judgment. I mean, there's things. It's not. That's why I think it's not just about, obviously it's not just about individuals. It's about other stuff. It's about both.
Right. So, yeah, Luke, what did you say? Luke 6? Luke 6 is the parallel, and
Yeah, Luke 6 has, and there are differences, but
blessings
they're all,
and woes. Yeah.
and he also has woes in there. So, and woe is not WH, not woe the horse. It's bad, it's judgment. It's judgment.
Right. Right. Yeah. That Luke doesn't get much publicity, but it'd be an interesting study to see what Luke was trying to tell the people of Jesus' day. Well, I think we're close to our time, and I'm so glad that we could see each other. We're living in times where we might need to learn some of these things. None of us know when we're going to be the ones who are mourning. That's so real to me than it has been for many months of my life, and so um, we need to have we need to have each other close by, I think, so we can study and figure this out. Anybody have any prayer updates or anything we need to share? I think we can pray for Daniel Farmer. He wanted to be here tonight, but he's been working um, 6 out of 7 days, and it sounds like he's kind of worn himself out. Is he working at the nursing home, Logan?
I'm not sure. We haven't had much time to really connect. So I
Okay.
texted a little bit, but we both have been having crazy lives.
Right.
And I'm
So,
having back surgery next week. So if you'll just keep me in your prayers. It's not a fully invasive, but it is a pain relieving surgery. So
oh boy. So will it be keep you overnight surgery?
no, it's an in and out kind of thing. I've got to be there for a recovery period and then I get to come home. But this particular is to do something there's like 3 steps to it. It's going to take about an hour and a half, but it's supposed to relieve the pain
Good.
uh, and
Good.
then to kind of keep me from having to go to like pain management all the time. So it's supposed to relieve the pain until
Yay.
I can really get approved for the actual fix.
Yeah. Well, keep us informed, okay, so we can update our prayers, but we'll certainly be keeping you in our prayers. All right. Well, I think I will stop sharing. And with that, it's